Around 260 million children are employed around the world, says the ILO, the International Labour Organization. Of them, 170 million children are engaged in child labor. What do you think? How many out of these 260 million children working are engaged in the fast fashion industry? Stay tuned as this video will be dedicated to the issue of child labor in the fast fashion industry. Hello everyone, this is Asil Sorbekova and welcome to my channel where I help you understand matters of fast fashion and sustainable development the legal way. So without further ado, let's get it started. In order to understand the problem of child labor in the fast fashion industry, we need to understand what it means to be a child working. And more specifically, we need to understand what is the definition of child labor. Child labor is defined by the United Nations organization as work for which the child is too young, work done below the required minimum age, or work which, because of its detrimental nature to the health of the child or conditions, is altogether considered unacceptable for children and is prohibited. So, in other words, that does not necessarily mean that a child cannot work at all, because even in developed countries, a child can work under circumstances which are not harmful to the health of the child or his both, social development, mental development, etc. And I'm sure that you, as a listener of this video, might have, worked when you were a child, or that you know somebody that has, also been employed at the age of 14, 15, 16 at a camp, at library, at, whatever job that was suitable for summer job, etc. So there's really nothing bad if, an underage person is working at places that are child friendly. And apart from the fact that this environment has to be child friendly, the amount of working hours per week, per day, etc., has to be, according to the law. There are strict requirements as to how many hours per week a child can work, and it certainly is not 40 hours or 35 hours per week. So how does child labor relate to the fast fashion industry? Because from one hand, you would think that sewing clothes is not like working at a mining or, some dangerous factory. It's just about sewing clothes and working with fabrics, right? But if you're familiar with the fast fashion industry and their supply chains, you would know that a ready-made garment industry, aka the fast fashion industry, is a complex environment that has been criticized for abuse of human rights, workers' rights, the strenuous, working conditions, excessive overtime that is most often not paid, small wages, and to top off the list, violations of human rights, women's rights, and use of forced labor and child labor. In the beginning of this video, I told you that there are 260 million working children in the whole world, and that out of these, there are 170 million children whose work can be qualified as child labor. And I will also said that a child labor is something that is not child friendly, that is not adapted for the whole, mental, social, and, for the very well-being of the child. So, 170 million children whose work is qualified is child labor. It's a very huge number in terms of, children employed. And, clearly, I try to find, the statistics, exact statistics on how many children out of this number are employed specifically in the fast fashion industry, in its supply chains. And it was hard to find because clearly the numbers, because you have to understand one thing. the industry which we call today the fast fashion industry is not a very traceable industry. Yes, fast fashion brands, they may work with, and that's what they're trying to do. They, make these commitments and, promises that they are working actually with these trusted, companies in the developing world, in the countries that, are known to be countries of supply chains of these brands. Yes, this is happening, that we can trace from where the clothes are coming from, but we're not actually aware of the fact that these main companies, they have subcontractors, and the subcontractors have subcontractors. I think I just made the word, made up a word. But you know what I mean, right? That there are, layers of, producers of these clothes. And if we know who is, who has a contract with the brand, the fashion brand, then, it's not the end of the story. That, under these factories, we have others who are out of the scene. And exactly these ones, these ones that are behind the scenes, these ones are actually known to have been hiring children as young as 10, as young as 5. There are horrible stories. And many of these child laborers work within the fast fashion supply chain, making the textiles and garments for fashion brands located in the developed world, and producing clothes for the clients, customers of that are located in the developed world, in Europe, US, and beyond. That means that we cannot know for sure whether for sure, our clothes were made by an adult. Perhaps, and most likely, at least at a certain some stage of making of these clothes, maybe whether it be button stitching or attaching labels, etc. This was made by a child, or just grabbing these clothes when they were ready and then bringing it to from point A to point B. This we cannot exclude. According to different reports, child labor is a big problem in the fast fashion industry. And for you to realize that, I want you to pay attention to the situation of countries, like India or Bangladesh. Basically, every developing country in the world has this or that percentage of child laborers, child workers, and these numbers can be significant. And this is not to attack only these countries like India or Bangladesh, but it's just an example to say that, basically the child labor is a problem that has been deeply rooted into, these countries, because it comes from, the economic, social, cultural, and other problems that exist in those, places. Let's take an example of the Rana Plaza building collapse, in the aftermath of which children were found dead, and other children were rescued. Some others received, um, permanent health damages. This is because children used to work in that building. And another example, let's discuss the situation of children in India. Let's recall, for these purposes, the movie The Slumdog Millionaire, a story of a child who had to survive in the streets of India and who was a victim of human traffickers, child, traffickers who, used to, gain profits out of work of children. And another one, the movie Lion, which was also, which also raised the long existing problem of lost children and child labor in India. So this is to say that a problem of child labor is a problem that exists in these countries. It is a problem of entire nations. So why am I telling you all these stories? Why am I, drawing, bringing an example of these countries, the problems that are deeply, social and cultural and economical. And you might say, it really has nothing to do with the fast fashion industry because these problems that exist in these countries themselves that have existed before, the fashion industry came to these countries. Why does child labor exist in the fast fashion industry? Well, because fast fashion has engendered a race to the bottom policies pushing companies to find ever cheaper sources of labor. That cheap labor is freely available in many of these countries where textile and garment production takes place. The reason I'm making parallels between cheap labor and child labor is because they have a lot to do with each other. Actually, that the child labor results from the fact of having cheap labor. Because imagine a situation where a family of four, let's say two adults and two children, the adults they already work at these jobs where they get paid little because the country is actually like that the labor is cheap in that country, and to make ends meet, to survive, this family lets their children work, these two children, or let's say one, doesn't matter. um, and then or that they get convinced by these recruiters that their children will be better off working and that their financial family situation will improve, and the child ends up working in places like sweatshops, which are not child friendly. This is to say that you will not have a high percentage child labor data in countries where labor is well paid. If the labor is well paid, then children will be going to school instead of working. Children will be going to a kindergarten because their parents will be able to afford this, and instead of letting their children work. But if the labor is so cheap that the children will not be able, to go to school or to even have to eat, to survive, to eat food, then, of course, in the absence of financial means to survive, the children will have to go to work. For example, a recent report by the Center for Research on Multinational Corporations called SAMA and the India Committee of the Netherlands called ICN revealed that recruiters in southern India convince parents in impoverished rural areas to send their daughters to spinning mills with promises of a well-paid job, comfortable accommodation, 3 nutritious meals a day, and opportunities for training and schooling, as well as a lump sum payment at the end of 3 years. That sounds quite promising. Their field research shows that in reality, they are working under appalling conditions that amount to modern day slavery and the worst forms of child labor. Child labor is a particular issue for fashion because much of the supply chain requires low-skilled labor and some tasks are even better suited to children than adults. Children are seen as obedient workers who slip under the radar, making them easy to manage. These are very low-skilled workers without a voice, so they are an easy target. Employers get away with it because the fashion supply chain is hugely complex and it is hard for companies to control every stage of production because I said that, these big factories, the giants that have contracts with fashion brands, they have subcontractors and these ones have subcontractors, etc. So, it's easy to get lost in this circle. How to end child labor in the fast fashion industry? Well, the answer to this question is not to say that the fast fashion brands need to take more measures to ensure that their supply chains do not hire child workers. In fact, I am pretty sure that in 95 to 98% of the cases, fashion brands have nothing to do with it, and that they are genuinely not guilty for their supply chains hiring child workers. Because as I said, most often than not, in more than 90% of cases, fashion brands, they work with these factories that have made a commitment to not hire children. Gone are the days when international brands and companies would be openly, directly or indirectly hiring child workers. So then, what is the solution? What can be done at the level of fast fashion brands? Well, the way I see it, as I said, fast fashion brands, they go to countries where labor is cheap. And this generates another problem, the problem of child labor. And in order to decrease the percentage of child labor, I think that fast fashion brands need to start paying better salaries, because if parents get better wages, then it will automatically lead to children going to school and not working at these precarious, jobs as, sweatshops. Because the work that these children do as employees of sweatshops and garment factories is not about sewing, stitching and sewing clothes. It's more than that, because these children they go through psychological, mental, and all sorts of damage. Because these adults, managers and stuff, they treat them as if they were adults, and this actually leads to long-term damages in terms of not only their physical health and also mental health. Because while working at these jobs, these children, they suffer mental, physical, verbal abuses. This is number one, that fast fashion brands need to pay better salaries in order to decrease child labor cases. And the second one, perhaps fast fashion brands need to work closely with NGOs, governments, and populations to help them eradicate these practices. To work at the level of communities, at the level of villages, etc., to let them understand that they have to be careful that the parents have to be careful when sending their children to work, not only to work at the factories, but garment factories, but just that child labor is not a way, is not a solution to go about. The question of child labor, to me personally, is not a strange subject, because I used to work when I was a child. I didn't work at a garment factory or something like that, but I used to help my parents at their food shop. There were days when I would be doing homework, school homework at that shop. This is to say that I know how hard it is to be a child and be employed. That was my case, was in the end of the 1990s, beginning of 2000. That was the situation of pretty much many children whose parents would be, in commercial sector, or, even, there were lots of cases in the country where I come from. Originally, in the end of the 1990s, beginning of 2000s, when children would have to work to help their parents. So that, yes, this is something that many developing countries had to go through. But what I'm trying to say is that, we are now in 2020, going on to 2021, and child labor at the level that it exists does not have to exist. It must not exist in 2020, because 2020 is the time of technology, it's the time of a new development, it's the time when we need to think of, future stuff. And but we're not there. We are not there yet, because the situation, the data when it comes to the fast fashion industry and child labor shows that there are in the world 170 million children whose work is qualified as child labor, a work which is not adapted for children. To conclude, fashion must not be associated with child labor. Therefore, fast fashion brands need to pay better wages to end child labor. That's all for today. For matters of fast fashion and sustainable development, subscribe to my channel. I post by 10 a.m. every Sunday, so if you want to watch similar videos like this, then join me every Sunday by 10 a.m. And if you like this video, don't forget to press the like button and leave a comment down below. Take care and see you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye.